The ballroom shimmered with thousands of crystal lights, the kind that looked beautiful to everyone except me. I sat quietly at a corner table, my hands folded neatly in my lap, pretending to enjoy the music that floated through the air like perfume. But inside, I couldn't shake the feeling that something about this day was wrong. My son, Michael, was finally remarrying after the tragic death of his first wife, Grace, 2 years ago. I should have been happy for him. Everyone said so. But my heart wasn't convinced. As I watched him hold his new bride, Sophie, I couldn't help but think of Grace's soft laughter, her kindness, and how suddenly she had vanished from our lives. People called it a tragic accident. I called it unfinished business. My 8-year-old granddaughter, Lily, sat beside me in her little white dress, her tiny feet barely touching the floor. She looked like a porcelain doll, delicate, quiet, but there was something different about her tonight. Normally, she'd chatter endlessly about her favorite stories or tug on my sleeve to ask for another piece of cake. But now, she sat frozen, her wide hazel eyes fixed on the dance floor, her lips pressed tightly together. She hadn't said a single word since the ceremony began. I noticed her hand trembling slightly as she held her juice glass. My heart ached. Grace's daughter, my precious Lily, had never been the same since her mother's death. But this wasn't her usual sadness. This was something else. Something darker. The music swelled, and all around us guests laughed and toasted. "To new beginnings," someone shouted, raising their glass. The sound of clinking crystal echoed through the hall. I smiled politely when someone caught my eye, but I didn't mean it. My eyes drifted back to Sophie, standing under the golden chandelier, her arm locked around my son's, her face glowing with triumph. I couldn't ignore the chill that crept down my spine. Sophie was beautiful, yes, too beautiful, in that polished, practiced way that hides something underneath. Even her laugh seemed rehearsed. I had told Michael more than once that he was moving too fast, that Grace wouldn't have wanted this. He'd brushed me off gently, saying, "Mom, Sophie helped me heal." Heal. The word felt ironic. Beside me, Lily finally moved. She tugged at my sleeve, gently at first, then urgently. I looked down at her, surprised by the sudden grip of her small fingers. Her face was pale, eyes shimmering with tears she was trying hard not to shed. "Grandma," she whispered, her voice quivering so softly I had to lean closer to hear her over the music. "Can we go home now?" "Home?" I asked, startled. "Sweetheart, the party just started. What's wrong?" Her little hand tightened around mine like she was clinging to life itself. "Please, Grandma," she whispered again, trembling. "I don't like it here. I don't like her." Her eyes darted towards Sophie, who was now whispering something in Michael's ear, her red lips curling into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I frowned, brushing Lily's hair gently out of her face. "She's your new stepmother, honey. Give her a chance." But Lily didn't answer. She just stared down at the white tablecloth, her tiny shoulders shaking. Then in a voice so small it barely existed, she said, "She told me not to tell you." My heart stopped. "Who did?" Lily didn't lift her head. "Sophie." It felt like the air was sucked out of the room. I looked toward Sophie again. She was laughing now, surrounded by guests, looking every bit the perfect bride. "Told you what, darling?" I asked carefully. Lily's lips quivered. She didn't look up. "She told me to keep the secret under the table." The words hit me like a blade between the ribs. My pulse began to pound in my ears. The laughter, the music, the flashing lights, it all faded into a distant hum. "What secret?" I whispered, but Lily just shook her head. "She said bad things happen to people who don't listen." My skin crawled. I tried to steady my breathing, to remind myself she was just a child. Maybe she misunderstood something. Maybe it was a game. But her expression, that wasn't imagination. That was fear. Genuine, bone-deep fear. I glanced under the table briefly, expecting to see nothing but floor and chair legs. But even before I moved the cloth, I felt it. A cold, heavy feeling, like the air beneath us was different. My hand hovered above the edge of the cloth, fingers trembling. "Lily," I whispered, trying to keep my voice steady. "What's under the table?" She shook her head violently, gripping my arm with both hands. "Don't look, Grandma. Please, don't." Her voice broke into a sob. For a few seconds, I froze, torn between logic and instinct. I wanted to comfort her, to tell her it was fine, that there was nothing to be afraid of. But her expression, that wasn't imagination. That was fear. Genuine, bone-deep fear. I glanced under the table briefly, expecting to see nothing but floor and chair legs. But even before I moved the cloth, I felt it. A cold, heavy feeling, like the air beneath us was different. My hand hovered above the edge of the cloth, fingers trembling. "Lily," I whispered, trying to keep my voice steady. "Did Sophie say something else to you? Did she hurt you?" Her face went white as marble. She looked up at me finally, her voice shaking uncontrollably. She said Mommy didn't fall. She said Mommy was pushed." My entire body went cold. For a moment, I couldn't even breathe. The music was still playing, soft jazz, cheerful and sweet, but it felt like a funeral dirge. My throat tightened as I looked at Sophie again. She was watching me now, her smile frozen, her eyes dark and unreadable. Did she hear us? I turned back to Lily, who was trembling, eyes glistening with terror. I pulled her into my arms, holding her tightly as if I could protect her from whatever shadow had followed us into the celebration. But deep down, I knew. Whatever was under that cable, whatever secret Sophie had made my granddaughter hide, was something that could destroy everything. And for the first time that night, I realized something horrifying. I wasn't just imagining the danger. It had been sitting right beneath us all along. For several long seconds, I sat frozen, holding Lily so tightly she could hardly breathe. Her little heart was pounding against my chest, matching the rhythm of my own racing pulse. All around us, the celebration carried on, clinking glasses, soft laughter, the steady pulse of a jazz band. But the air felt different now, heavier. I tried to tell myself I had misheard her, that a child's imagination had twisted a careless comment, but the tremor in her voice had been too real. Sophie said Grace didn't fall. She was pushed. Those words clawed at my mind, scraping open memories I had tried to bury. Grace's accident on the balcony 2 years ago, the unanswered questions, the way Sophie had comforted Michael at the funeral only days later. I forced a smile, the kind you give when pretending everything is fine. "It's all right, sweetheart," I whispered to Lily, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "Stay right here with Grandma, okay?" She clung to my sleeve, shaking her head violently, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Don't, Grandma. Please don't." But I had already made up my mind. If Sophie thought I was too old or too timid to face the truth, she was wrong. I reached down slowly, my fingers trembling, and lifted the edge of the lace tablecloth. Candlelight flickered underneath, throwing small shifting shadows across the floor. At first I saw nothing unusual: the wooden legs of our chairs, Lily's tiny patent leather shoes, the polished marble beneath us. Then, just as I was about to let the cloth drop, something glinted faintly in the dark. A small silver flash near Lily's feet. I leaned closer. It was a thin chain, tangled around one of the chair legs. My stomach tightened. I gently freed it and pulled it out. Hanging from the chain was a locket, oval-shaped, old, and unmistakably familiar. I didn't even need to open it to know whose it was. Grace's. She never took it off, not once, in the 10 years she had been part of our family. After the accident, the police said they couldn't find it at the scene. My fingers trembled as I snapped it open, and inside the miniature photo of Grace and Michael smiled back at me, faded from time. But behind the picture, folded so tightly it looked hidden on purpose, was a scrap of paper. My pulse thundered as I eased it free and unfolded it. Grace's handwriting. I knew that looping script anywhere. If anything happens to me, please protect Lily. Don't trust Sophie. That was all, just those 11 words, but they detonated like a bomb inside my chest. I looked up, dazed, the letters shaking in my hand. Across the hall, Sophie was cutting the wedding cake, her laughter echoing over the music. She looked radiant, calm, confident, in control. And when our eyes met for the briefest moment, I saw it. A flicker of awareness. A knowing smile. She turned away quickly, whispering something to Michael, who nodded, oblivious. Lily tugged at my arm again, her voice hoarse from crying. "Grandma, you weren't supposed to find it. She said she'd be mad if anyone did." I took her tiny face in my hands. "Did Sophie tell you to hide this under the table?" Lily hesitated, guilt and fear battling inside her eyes. "She said it was a game. She said Mommy wanted us to keep secrets, and if I was good, she'd give me a new dress. She started to pry harder. I didn't know it was bad, Grandma. I didn't know." I pulled her close, my heart breaking and burning at the same time. "Shh, my love. You didn't do anything wrong." Somewhere behind me, I heard footsteps approaching. A waiter, tall and pale under the chandeliers, appeared beside our table with a polite smile. "Madam, the bride would like to speak with you privately. She's in the garden terrace." Every nerve in my body went rigid. Sophie wanted to see me? Now? I forced a nod and thanked him, hiding the locket inside my purse and slipping the folded note beneath my napkin. Then I turned to Lily. "Stay here, sweetheart. Don't move, all right? I'll be right back." Her hands tightened around my wrist. "No, Grandma. Don't go with her." "I'll be fine," I lied, kissing her forehead. "Keep your toy car with you." She nodded weakly, clutching the small red car Grace had given her on her last birthday. As I stood, I could feel Sophie's gaze following me across the room. She was waiting by the open terrace doors, framed by fairy lights and the soft glow of night. Beyond her, the garden shimmered under the moonlight, the same garden where Grace's memorial had been held. The memory made my stomach twist. "Margaret, you look pale. Are you all right?" "I'm fine," I replied, forcing a smile. "It's been an emotional day." She tilted her head, studying me. Up close, her beauty looked colder, almost calculated. "Yes," she said softly, stepping closer. "Emotional, indeed. It must be hard watching Michael move on." Her words were knives wrapped in silk. I met her gaze steadily. "Grace would have wanted him happy." "Oh, I'm sure she would," she murmured. Then her lips curved in a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "By the way, did Lily behave? She's such a curious little thing. Sometimes she hides under tables." My heart stopped. I forced a small laugh. "Children are full of surprises." "Yes," she said quietly, stepping closer, "and sometimes they find things they shouldn't." Her perfume was strong, sweet, but suffocating. "If Lily told you something strange, don't take it seriously. You know how children can imagine things." I looked straight into her eyes. Children don't imagine warnings from their dead mothers. For a split second, the perfect smile faltered. Then it was back. "You've had too much wine, Margaret. Go sit down." She turned sharply and walked away, heels clicking against the marble. I stood there, my body trembling, rage and fear mixing inside me. She knew I found it. She wanted me to find it. Why? When I returned to the table, Lily was gone. My heart dropped into my stomach. Her chair was empty, the napkin on the floor, her toy car lying upside down near the table leg. The folded note I'd hidden beneath the napkin was missing. I called her name once, twice, but the music drowned me out. Across the ballroom, Sophie was standing by the exit, holding Lily's hand. The child's face was pale, her eyes swollen from crying. Sophie smiled sweetly at the guests as she whispered something in Lily's ear and led her toward the corridor that led to the old service hallway, the one that opened near the garden fountain. I didn't even think. I ran. The laughter, the lights, the music, all of it vanished behind me. My heels echoed against the marble floor, my pulse roaring in my ears. I pushed past startled guests and burst through the doorway, the night air cold and sharp against my skin. Somewhere in the darkness ahead, I heard Lily's muffled sob. And then, Sophie's calm voice. "You really shouldn't have looked under that table, Margaret." The night had fallen deep and heavy over the estate, the kind of darkness that swallows every sound. I followed the faint echo of Sophie's voice, my heart pounding in my chest like a warning drum. The air smelt of wet grass and roses, the same scents that had clung to Grace the night she died. The memory clawed at me, Grace's pale face, the way her body lay twisted near the marble fountain. The police had said she slipped, but deep down, I had always known something was wrong. Now, standing here again, chasing Sophie through the same garden, that old dread returned full force. I caught sight of them near the fountain. Sophie stood perfectly still, her hand gripping Lily's shoulder tightly. The moonlight painted her in silver and shadow, her white wedding gown glowing faintly like a ghost. Lily's small frame trembled beside her, her sobs muffled by Sophie's palm. "Let her go," I shouted, my voice cracking through the night. She didn't even flinch. Instead, she turned her head slowly, that calm, poisonous smile spreading across her face. "You should have stayed inside, Margaret. The past is buried for a reason." I took a step forward, my eyes darting to Lily. "If you hurt her—" "Oh, don't be dramatic," Sophie interrupted, her tone light, almost mocking. "I would never hurt Lily. She's the only part of Grace that's useful." The words hit me like ice water. "Useful," I repeated, my stomach twisting. Sophie's eyes glittered. "You never wondered why Michael moved on so fast, why he didn't grieve the way you expected." She tilted her head, studying me. "Because Grace was already planning to leave him. She had secrets, Margaret, dangerous ones. When I found out what she was doing, I saved him and this family from ruin." Her voice was soft, reasonable, like she was explaining a favor instead of confessing a crime. "What are you talking about?" I demanded, though part of me didn't want to know. Sophie stepped closer to the fountain, the water rippling under the moonlight. Grace was going to expose something that would destroy Michael's reputation. Something about his company, his investors, the illegal money running through it. She was planning to disappear with Lily and start a new life. She even bought plane tickets. Sophie's smile deepened. I stopped her. My throat went dry. "You killed her." She didn't deny it. I protected the man I love, and now you're trying to destroy everything again, just like she did. She reached into her gown and pulled out something small and metallic, the folded note from the locket. My heart dropped. "Looking for this?" she asked. Grace really thought she could outsmart me. And now you've dragged poor Lily into this mess." Lily whimpered. "Grandma, I'm scared." "It's all right, sweetheart," I said, stepping closer. "Not another step." Her voice had lost its calm. "Do you know how hard it is to keep a secret for years? To smile in front of people who destroy you if they knew the truth? You should be thanking me for keeping this family intact." "By murdering my daughter-in-law?" I snapped. Her eyes darkened. "By saving Michael from prison. Grace was blackmailing him, Margaret. She found things she shouldn't have." She leaned closer, whispering fiercely. But what she didn't know was that I was the one who helped Michael cover it up in the first place. That's why he trusts me. That's why he loves me. We're in this together. I shook my head, disbelief fighting the nausea rising inside me. "You're lying." She smiled again, that empty, chilling smile. "Then ask him." I could hear faint music drifting from the ballroom now, the world going on, blissfully unaware of the storm outside. I took a deep breath, forcing calm into my voice. "Sophie, you can still fix this. Just let Lily go. We'll talk to Michael together. You don't have to hide anymore." She laughed, a brittle, hysterical sound. "Hide? You still don't get it, do you? If Michael ever finds out what really happened that night, he'll lose everything. His company, his freedom, his precious reputation. I can't let that happen. And you're a liability now." Before I could react, she pushed Lily forward suddenly. The little girl stumbled toward me, sobbing. "Run!" I shouted, shoving her behind me. But when I looked up again, Sophie had pulled something from her purse, a small pistol gleaming under the moonlight. "I didn't want it to end like this," she said, her voice trembling slightly now. "But you've left me no choice." "Think about Lily," I said quickly. "You're her stepmother now. You'll never escape what she sees tonight." For a split second, something flickered in Sophie's eyes. Doubt, guilt, humanity. Then she hardened again. "Grace said the same thing," she whispered. My knees weakened. "What?" "She begged me, said Lily would grow up hating me." Sophie's voice cracked. "But children forget. They believe what they're told." My hand crept behind me, feeling for the old iron rake leaning against the nearby hedge. Grace's gardener had left it there after trimming the roses earlier that day. I kept my eyes on Sophie. "You're wrong," I said softly. "Lily remembers everything." Sophie's gaze darted towards Lily, just for an instant. It was enough. I swung the rake forward, knocking the pistol from her hand. The gun clattered across the stone path and into the fountain with a splash. Sophie screamed, lunging at me. We both fell against the edge of the fountain, water spraying over us as we struggled. Her hands went for my throat, her nails digging into my skin. "You should have stayed out of it," she hissed, her face inches from mine. I gasped for air, pushing with all the strength I had left. My hand found the heavy silver locket in my pocket. Grace's locket. I swung it like a fistful of faith, striking her across the cheek. She reeled backward, losing her footing on the wet stones. There was a moment of stunned silence, and then a scream. Sophie slipped, her heel catching the edge of the fountain. Time slowed. I reached for her instinctively, but she pulled away, eyes wide with shock, before plunging backward into the water. The splash echoed through the garden, followed by stillness. I stood there, panting, trembling, soaked to the bone. The moonlight shimmered on the water's surface, rippling over Sophie's motionless form. "Grandma, is she gone?" I turned to her, my chest tightening. "Stay back, sweetheart." Somewhere behind us, I heard footsteps, fast, urgent, and Michael's voice calling our names. The guest must have heard the scream. I stared at the fountain one last time. The same place where Grace had died. The same place where Sophie now lay. Only this time, the truth wasn't buried. But as I pulled Lily into my arms, a cold realization hit me. Sophie's last words weren't a lie. Michael was hiding something, and the real danger might not have been Sophie at all. The garden was alive with chaos. Guests rushed out of the ballroom, their laughter dissolving into horrified gasps as they saw Sophie's body floating lifelessly in the fountain. The band's music screeched to a halt, and in the distance, someone shouted to call an ambulance. But I stood frozen, clutching Lily tightly to my chest. The scent of roses and wet stone mixed with the coppery tang of fear. My son Michael pushed through the crowd, his face pale and eyes wide in disbelief. "What happened?" he demanded, his voice sharp, trembling at the edges. "Mom, what did you do?" I opened my mouth to answer, but the words wouldn't come. I could still feel Sophie's cold fingers on my throat, her words echoing in my mind. "You never wondered why he moved on so fast." Lily whimpered, burying her face in my shoulder. "She tried to hurt Grandma," she whispered, her voice breaking. Michael stared at me, then at Sophie's motionless body, and something flickered in his eyes. Not grief, not shock, but something darker. Fear. The police arrived within minutes, flashing lights painting the garden in shades of red and blue. Officers swarmed the scene, pushing the curious guests back into the ballroom. An ambulance crew pulled Sophie's body from the fountain, covering her with a white sheet. Michael stayed silent, standing a few feet away, his hands trembling at his sides. When the paramedics pronounced her dead, he didn't flinch, not a single tear. "Sir, we'll need both of you to come to the station for statements." Michael nodded mechanically, but his eyes were on me, cold, searching. I couldn't tell if he blamed me or if he was simply calculating his next move. Hours later, after endless questioning, the police ruled it an accident, an unfortunate fall during a confrontation. My bruised neck and Sophie's fingerprints supported my version of events. Still, something about the way Michael looked at me that night didn't sit right. He didn't thank me for saving Lily. He didn't even ask if we were okay. Instead, as we left the station, he muttered, "You should have stayed out of it, Mom." His tone was quiet, but laced with venom. I froze. "She tried to kill me, Michael. She was protecting me. You don't understand what you've done." Those words, so eerily similar to Sophie's, sent a chill crawling down my spine. Back at the house, Lily was asleep in the guest room, her little face streaked with dry tears. I sat by her side, brushing her hair from her forehead, my heart aching for her innocence. Then, from downstairs, I heard Michael's voice, low and angry. He was on the phone. I crept down the staircase, each creak of the old wood sounding like thunder in the silence. "She's dead," he hissed. "Yes, I know what that means. No, I don't care. We need to clean up the rest before the board finds out." I stopped mid-step, my breath caught in my throat. The board, the company. Sophie had mentioned investors, illegal money. I told her not to go digging around, but she found the files, Grace, then my mother. If anyone else connects the dots, it's over. My blood ran cold. He paused, listening. "No, it's not just about the embezzlement. It's the transfers, the ones from the offshore accounts. If those come out, we're finished. The entire family." Finished. Family. The words tangled in my mind like thorns. I stepped back quietly, trying not to make a sound, but my heel brushed against the edge of the stair. The faint creak echoed through the hall. Michael turned sharply. "Mom?" I froze, my pulse racing. "I couldn't sleep," I lied, forcing a smile. "Just getting some water." He stared at me for a long moment, then forced a tight smile. "Long night. Try to rest." But his eyes, the same eyes I had loved since the day he was born, were no longer my son's. They were the eyes of a man with something to hide. Later, when the house fell silent again, I slipped into Michael's office. The door was locked, but he'd forgotten to change the key since I lived here years ago. Inside, the air smelled faintly of whiskey and expensive cologne. Papers were strewn across his desk, and his laptop still hummed faintly. I clicked it awake. Dozens of files lined the desktop, financial reports, encrypted folders, and a document labeled Confidential Partners. My hands trembled as I opened it. What I saw made my stomach twist. Bank statements, transfers to foreign accounts, shell companies. But the names, that's what made me sick. Michael's company was laundering money through charities, including one in Grace's name, the very charity that had been founded after her death to support widows and children. It was all a facade. Grace must have discovered it. She must have confronted him. And Sophie? She had killed to protect it. I scrolled further, my eyes burning with disbelief. One entry stood out. Transfer from GA Foundation to personal account. Approved by M. Carter. It was dated a week after Grace's funeral. I covered my mouth, stifling a sob. My son, my own flesh and blood, had used his dead wife's name to cover his crimes? Suddenly, the screen went black. Michael's reflection appeared in the glass, standing behind me. "Couldn't sleep, huh?" he said softly. I froze, my pulse racing. He stepped closer, his expression unreadable. "You shouldn't have opened that, Mom." I turned slowly, meeting his cold, hollow stare. "What did you do, Michael?" He sighed, almost tired. "What I had to. Grace was going to ruin everything. Sophie helped me until you interfered." "You let her kill Grace?" I whispered. His eyes flickered with something like regret, but it vanished instantly. "I didn't let anything happen. Grace was unstable. She was blackmailing me. Sophie just handled it before it got out of control." "Handled it?" I repeated, disgust curling in my gut. "You call murder handling it?" He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You don't understand, Mom. I built this empire from nothing. You think I'll let you or anyone else destroy it?" I backed away slowly. "I'm calling the police." Michael's smirk was faint, almost pitying. "No, you won't. Because if this family falls, so does Lily. Everything. The house, the trust fund, her future. You'd rather see her in poverty than protect her?" Tears burned my eyes, but I stood my ground. "You already destroyed her future." He tilted his head, studying me like a predator. "Then I guess we're at an impasse." For a long moment, the silence between us was heavy, electric. Then he said quietly, "Go to bed, Mom. Forget what you saw." He turned off the laptop, slipped a small USB drive into his pocket, and left the room. I stood there trembling, alone in the dark. The truth was out now, not just about Sophie, but about Michael. The son I once cradled in my arms was capable of the same darkness that took Grace's life. But this time, I wouldn't stay silent. This time, I would finish what Grace started. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house sounded like Michael's footsteps outside my door. Every whisper of the wind felt like Grace's ghost, reminding me I was still breathing when she wasn't. The walls of that mansion had witnessed too many lies already, and now they were closing in on me. I sat at my desk with the small silver locket lying open before me, its hidden note smoothed flat on the table. It wasn't just a warning, it was a map. Grace had written names, bank codes, and one cryptic phrase at the bottom: "The roses hide the key." I understood then that she'd hidden something tangible, proof of Michael's crimes, somewhere in this house, and Sophie's obsession with the garden suddenly made sense. I waited until the early light of dawn bled into the curtains before I moved. Lily was still asleep, her small hand clutching the stuffed rabbit Grace had given her. I kissed her forehead and promised silently that I would never let the darkness take her too. Then I slipped out into the garden. The morning mist clung to the rose bushes like smoke. My throat still ached where Sophie's nails had dug in, but I ignored the pain and began searching among the roots. The fountain was still, its water a mirror of gray sky. Beneath the largest rose bush, Grace's favorite variety, the crimson Queen of Hearts, I found disturbed soil. I knelt, scraping away the earth with trembling hands until my fingers struck metal. It was a small tin box wrapped in layers of plastic. My pulse quickened as I peeled it open. Inside were 2 USB drives, a bundle of old photographs, and a small, blood-stained note addressed to me. "If you're reading this, Margaret, it means he knows. Protect Lily, and never trust anyone with my eyes." I didn't realize I was crying until the tears blurred the ink. I stuffed the box into my jacket and hurried back inside, careful not to leave traces on the wet stones. But as I reached the veranda, the front door creaked open. Michael stood there, shirt unbuttoned, eyes hollow from a sleepless night. "Up early?" he asked softly. I needed some air. His gaze drifted to my muddy hands, then to the garden behind me. "You always did love those roses." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he reached into his pocket, pulled out the same silver USB drive I'd seen last night, and twirled it between his fingers. "Mom, whatever you think you found, it doesn't change anything. You can't fight this." I met his eyes, steadying my voice. "I'm not fighting, Michael. I'm surviving." He stared at me, something unreadable flickering behind his calm expression. "Then survive somewhere else. Take Lily and leave the country for a while. I'll transfer some money. Just don't dig any deeper." He turned away before I could answer, disappearing up the stairs. That was his mistake. He thought fear could buy silence. The moment he was gone, I went to my room, pried open the floor vent, and hid Grace's tin box inside. Then I began copying the contents of both USB drives onto my old laptop. Most of the files were encrypted, but one opened easily. A hidden camera feed. My stomach turned as the video came to life. A video from the night Grace died. It showed the garden in grainy black and white. Grace stood near the fountain, holding her phone, tears glistening on her cheeks. Michael appeared from the darkness, shouting, gesturing wildly. They argued for nearly 2 minutes before Sophie emerged, still in her robe, her face pale with fury. Grace backed away, slipped, and then Sophie shoved her. It was quick, brutal, and final. The screen froze on Grace's fall, then cut to static. I slammed the laptop shut, shaking. This was it, proof. Everything Sophie had confessed, everything Michael had covered up, it was all there. I didn't have time to think before my phone buzzed. Unknown number. A text appeared. "He knows you have it. Leave now." I looked out the window. A black SUV idled at the end of the driveway, its windows tinted too dark to see inside. Panic surged through me. I grabbed Lily's bag, stuffed in some clothes, the USBs, the locket, and Grace's note. "Sweetheart," I whispered, shaking her awake, "we're going on a little trip." She blinked sleepily. "To see Mommy?" The question pierced me like glass. "Not yet, darling, but soon." By the time we reached the garage, I heard the creak of floorboards upstairs, Michael's door opening. I hurried Lily into the car, started the engine, and backed out, gravel crunching beneath the tires. In the rearview mirror, I saw Michael appear at the top of the steps, phone pressed to his ear, shouting something I couldn't hear. Then headlights flared behind us, the SUV pulling onto the road. "Hold on, Lily," I said, pressing the accelerator. The morning fog swallowed the road as I sped toward the city. My hands trembled on the steering wheel, but my mind was clear now. The truth was no longer buried under roses. It was in my hands, and that made us targets. After an hour of driving, I pulled into a small roadside diner. I needed a plan. The news on the radio was already buzzing with the story of Sophie's accidental death, reporters speculating about tragedy and scandal. No one knew the truth yet, but they would. I opened the laptop again, copying the video to a hidden online drive. Then I wrote an email to a journalist Grace had once trusted, attaching a short message. "She didn't fall. They killed her. Proof attached. If anything happens to me, tell Lily the roses kept their promise." I scheduled it to send automatically in 12 hours. Lily tugged my sleeve. Grandma, are we in trouble? I forced a smile through the tears. No, honey, we're heroes in hiding. But before I could close the laptop, the diner lights flickered. A shadow passed the window, a man in a black coat holding a phone, scanning the room. My breath caught. It wasn't Michael. It was someone worse. One of his partners. Lily's hand found mine under the table. Grandma, the man outside, he was at the wedding. I turned slowly. The man was watching us, a faint smile on his lips. Then he tapped his ear as if listening to someone and mouthed two words that turned my blood to ice. Too late. I stood quickly, pulling Lily toward the back exit. My pulse thundered as we ran through the kitchen, the sound of heavy footsteps following. Out the back door, across the empty parking lot, into the woods beyond the diner. My lungs burned, my vision blurred, but I kept going. For Grace, for Lily, for the truth. When we finally stopped, hidden among the trees, Lily clutched her rabbit tightly and whispered, Grandma, will Daddy find us? I stared back toward the road where the SUV's headlights glowed faintly through the fog. Not if I find him first, I said, my voice steady despite the fear clawing at my throat. The war for our family's soul had just begun. The air inside the mansion had turned thick, heavy, and almost suffocating. The joyous chatter from earlier was gone. Instead, whispers slithered through the guests like shadows. Sophie stood at the center of it all, her once perfect smile trembling as suspicion crept into every glance. But beneath that surface panic, I saw something darker in her eyes. Rage, cold and controlled, like a serpent waiting to strike. Michael tried to speak, but his voice cracked with confusion. Mom, please, what's going on? Why are you showing this? I turned to him slowly, the paper shaking in my hand. Because your wife-to-be isn't who she says she is, Michael. Your daughter knows the truth. And Grace, your late wife, knew it too. My words dropped into the silence like stones into still water. The guests gasped. Their curiosity mingled with fear. Sophie's eyes darted from me to Lily, and in that split second, I saw pure panic flicker across her face. She took one step toward Lily, her voice unnervingly calm. Sweethearts, come here. Grandma is just tired. She's confused. But Lily stepped back, clutching the corner of my dress, tears streaking her small face. No, she said not to tell anyone, Grandma, but you have to. She said Mommy would be gone forever if we did. The hall fell completely silent. My chest tightened. Sophie's mask shattered for just a second, revealing the predator beneath the charm. Sophie straightened, her breathing sharp and controlled. You've had too much to drink, Evelyn, she hissed softly, but I could hear the venom in her tone. Michael stared at her, torn between disbelief and dawning horror. Sophie, what is Lily talking about? Sophie's lips trembled, then twisted into something that wasn't quite a smile. You're letting your mother manipulate you, Michael. She never wanted us to be happy. Her voice rose, a perfect mixture of hurt and accusation. It might have worked, if not for the sound that broke through her performance. A bang from upstairs. Everyone turned. The sound was faint but unmistakable. A door slamming shut, followed by hurried footsteps. The guests froze, glancing around nervously. Michael's face drained of color. There's no one else upstairs, he said quietly. That floor is off limits. My heartbeat thundered. Without waiting for anyone, I took Lily's hand and started toward the grand staircase. Michael followed, and after a moment's hesitation, so did a few guests. Sophie didn't move. Her eyes followed me, cold and furious. As we climbed the steps, each creak echoed like a warning. The hallway above was dark, the air colder. I flicked on the switch, but the lights flickered once, then went out. Lily's grip on my hand tightened. Grandma, I don't like this. It's okay, sweetheart, I said softly. though fear had already sunk its claws deep into me. We reached the end of the hallway, where a door stood half open, the same one I'd seen Sophie lock earlier that week when I came to drop off Lily's things. I pushed it open slowly. The smell hit first. Something faint, but unmistakable. A mix of old perfume and mold. Inside was a small study, lined with books, but what drew my eyes was the large trunk in the corner. My pulse raced. As I approached it, the lock had been broken recently. I knelt down, hesitated, then lifted the lid. Inside were piles of papers, photos, and God help me, a phone. Grace's phone. The same phone the police had never recovered after her so-called accident. My breath caught as I powered it on. The screen flickered weakly, but it came to life. Dozens of saved voicemails, one marked urgent, caught my eye. I pressed play. Grace's voice, shaky and terrified, filled the room. "Mom, if you get this, please listen. I think Sophie is following me. She's not who she says she is. She knows something about Michael's company. If anything happens to me, look under the table. She hid the proof there." I dropped the phone, my blood freezing. Sophie's footsteps echoed from downstairs, slow, deliberate. She was coming. Michael looked at me, horror written across his face. "Mom, you think she killed Grace?" I whispered, my voice trembling. "And she's not done yet." Suddenly, the lights in the hallway flickered back on, and there she was, standing at the top of the stairs, a cruel smile curling on her lips. "You shouldn't have come up here, Evelyn," she said, her tone icy. "Now you've ruined everything." My hand instinctively moved to shield Lily behind me. Sophie straightened, her breathing sharp and controlled. "You just had to dig where you didn't belong." Just like Grace. Michael stepped between us, trembling with fury. "Tell me the truth, Sophie." She laughed, a sound so chilling it barely sounded human. "The truth is, your wife found out something she shouldn't have, and I had to protect what's mine." Before we could react, Sophie lunged at the desk, yanking open a drawer. The metallic glint of a gun flashed under the flickering light. "No one is leaving," she hissed. Chaos erupted. Guests screamed from below as Michael tried to reach her. I grabbed Lily and ducked behind the trunk, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. Sophie's voice echoed, sharp and broken. "You don't understand. He was supposed to love me. I did everything. For us." The walls seemed to close in, fear clawing at every breath. And in that terrifying moment, as she turned her weapon toward Michael, I realized the real danger wasn't just Sophie's lies. It was what she was willing to destroy to keep them hidden. The room seemed to shrink as Sophie stood there, her hand trembling around the cold metal of the gun. The chandelier light reflected off its barrel, scattering fractured beams across the walls like shards of glass. Michael froze, mid-step, his face pale, his hands raised slightly. "Sophie, please," he said, his voice low and steady. "Put that down. You don't want to do this." But the wild gleam in her eyes said otherwise. "Don't I?" she spat, her voice cracking with rage and hysteria. "You think I spent years building everything just to lose it to your perfect little family? To her?" She pointed the gun toward the phone in my hand, the phone that had Grace's final message. "Give it to me, Evelyn, now." I clutched it tighter, shaking my head. "You can't erase the truth, Sophie. It's over." Her expression twisted, something dark surfacing behind her controlled exterior. "Over?" She laughed, the sound sharp and empty. "You have no idea what's coming." Lily whimpered softly behind me, and Sophie's gaze flicked toward her. That tiny movement set my heart racing. "Leave the child out of this," I said quickly, stepping forward. Sophie tilted her head slightly, that eerie calm settling over her again. She already knows too much, just like her mother. The words hit like a slap. Michael's face went from fear to fury. "You killed Grace," he said, voice trembling but rising. You pushed her off that bridge." Sophie's lips curled into a faint smile. "Accidents happen," she said simply. Michael lunged, but Sophie fired. A deafening crack split the air. The bullet hit the wall just inches from him, sending plaster flying. The guests below screamed as the echo rang through the mansion. I felt Lily press her face against my leg, sobbing quietly. My ears rang. The acrid smell of gunpowder filled the air. "Next one won't miss," she hissed. "Now, give me the phone." I knew reasoning with her was pointless. Her mind had snapped. The desperation, the lies, the years of deception had finally consumed her. But I needed to buy time. "Sophie," I said softly, "you said you built everything for love. Is this what love looks like? Threatening a child? Destroying the man you claim to love?" Her hand wavered slightly. I could see it, the smallest crack in her fury. Michael noticed it too. He took a cautious step forward, his voice softer now. "Sophie, look at me. We can fix this. Whatever you've done, we can fix it. Just, please, put the gun down." Her breath hitched, eyes flickering between us. For a fleeting moment, I thought she might surrender. Then her expression hardened again. "You don't get it," she said, voice trembling. "They made me do it. I didn't have a choice." That one sentence shifted everything. Michael froze. "Who made you?" he asked. Sophie's lips quivered, tears finally slipping down her cheeks. "Your company, Michael. The people behind your projects. Grace found out. She wasn't supposed to. She thought she could expose them. They told me if I didn't stop her, they'd destroy all of us." Her voice broke into sobs, but the gun never lowered. "I didn't mean to hurt her. I just wanted to scare her. She fell. It wasn't supposed to happen like that." The horror of her confession sank in like a knife twisting slowly. I wanted to feel pity, but all I could think about was Grace's voice in that recording, trembling, begging for help that never came. Michael's expression crumbled. "You could have told me. You could have told the police." Sophie shook her head violently. "You don't understand. They're watching everything, even now." Her eyes darted toward the hallway cameras, then back to me. "You think this is about us? You think this ends here? No." Her hand jerked upward and the gun pointed toward the ceiling. Another shot fired, shattering the chandelier above us. Glass rained down like a storm of fire and light. Screams erupted below as guests scrambled for cover. The power flickered, then went out entirely. Darkness swallowed the hall, broken only by the faint emergency lights near the exit. I grabbed Lily and pulled her behind the trunk again. The floor creaked. I could hear Sophie moving, her heels clicking softly across the marble. Michael's voice was somewhere in the dark. "Sophie, please, don't do this." Her voice floated through the shadows, low, broken, unhinged. "You don't understand. It's too late. It's all too late." Suddenly, a loud thud echoed, a struggle. My pulse spiked. I tried to peer around the trunk, but the dim light barely revealed their shapes, two silhouettes grappling near the balcony railing. The gun went off again. A scream followed, then silence. My breath caught as I crawled forward, clutching Lily close. When the emergency lights flickered brighter, I saw Michael standing, chest heaving, the gun clattering away across the floor. Sophie was on her knees, her hands trembling, blood trailing from a cut on her head. "It's over," Michael said, voice shaking. "No one else gets hurt." For a moment, she looked at him with something that almost resembled sorrow. "You still don't get it," she whispered. "They'll come for you next." Before any of us could react, she lunged again, not for the gun, but for the phone still clutched in my hand. I stumbled back, but she managed to snatch it, pressing a few buttons frantically. The screen glowed with a strange message. "Backup activated. Deleting evidence." My stomach dropped. "No!" I screamed, rushing forward. But Sophie only smiled, that same hollow smile she wore the first day I met her. "You can't stop what's already begun," she whispered. Then, before Michael could grab her, she turned and ran toward the balcony. The glass doors burst open, wind howling through the shattered chandelier above. "Sophie, stop!" Michael shouted, chasing her. But she spun around just once, eyes wild, hair whipping in the wind. "Tell them I tried," she cried, and then she stepped back into the darkness. The sound of breaking glass and the sickening thud below tore through the hall. Lily screamed. Michael fell to his knees, trembling, staring at the empty balcony. I stood frozen, heart pounding so violently it hurt to breathe. The phone lay shattered on the marble floor, its screen flickering one last time before going black. Outside, the sirens had already begun to wail in the distance. The nightmare wasn't over, it was only just beginning. The sound of sirens grew louder as red and blue lights flashed through the shattered windows, painting the ballroom walls in streaks of chaos. Guests huddled together in tears, their elegant clothes torn and blood-stained from the falling glass. Michael sat on the floor, motionless, his hands covered in dust and specks of blood. Lily clung to me, her little body trembling. Outside, officers shouted commands, their boots pounding across the marble steps. Paramedics rushed through the door, and the once beautiful wedding hall, the symbol of celebration, had turned into a crime scene. My heart pounded as I looked toward the balcony. Below, in the courtyard, Sophie's body lay still among the shattered glass and rose petals that had fallen from her bouquet. The cold night wind blew through the broken windows, carrying with it the scent of burnt candles and fear. Two detectives entered, one of them tall and sharp-eyed, his badge glinting under the flickering emergency lights. "Everyone, stay where you are. Nobody leaves until we've taken statements." He turned toward Michael, who was now being helped to his feet by an officer. "Sir, are you the groom?" Michael nodded weakly, his voice barely audible. She jumped. Sophie, she just jumped." The detective's gaze flicked toward me. "And you're his mother?" I nodded, clutching Lily close. "She attacked us. She had a gun. She confessed." My voice broke before I could finish. The detective's expression remained unreadable, but I could see the way his eyes darted to the balcony, then to the shattered phone on the floor. "We'll need that," he said, crouching to pick it up carefully with gloved hands. "Whatever's left of it might explain a lot." As the investigators began collecting evidence, I sank into a chair, my body heavy with exhaustion. Lily had stopped crying, but stared blankly at the chaos, her small hands gripping mine tightly. I brushed her hair gently and whispered, "It's over, sweetheart." But even as I said it, a knot of unease twisted in my chest. Something didn't feel right. Sophie's last words echoed in my head. "They'll come for you next." What did she mean by that? Who were they? I glanced toward the phone in the detective's hand. It had stopped flickering, the screen completely dead. Whatever message Sophie had triggered before jumping might have already reached someone else. Hours passed before the police cleared the scene. The wedding guests were escorted out one by one, some still sobbing, others too shocked to speak. Michael and I were taken to a private room for questioning. Detective Harris, the same sharp-eyed officer from earlier, sat across from us, his notepad open. "I need to understand everything that happened tonight," he said. Michael told him everything, how Sophie had confessed to Grace's death, how she claimed powerful people had forced her hand, and how she destroyed the evidence before taking her own life. The detective scribbled notes, his brow furrowed. Did she mention any names, any organizations? Michael shook his head. No, just that Grace found out something dangerous, something about my company's investors. The detective's pen stopped mid-scribble. Rothwell Industries, he repeated quietly, as if the name itself carried weight. He looked up at Michael. You're saying your wife believes someone at Rothwell was involved in her death? Michael nodded slowly. Yes, she told me once that she discovered discrepancies in financial records, millions missing from humanitarian projects. A week later, she died in that so-called accident. The detective's eyes darkened. And now Sophie's dead too. He closed his notepad. This isn't coincidence anymore. I felt my stomach twist. Detective, I said softly, if what Sophie said was true, if there are people behind this, what happens now? He looked at me grimly. Now, Mrs. Walker, we find out who's been pulling the strings. But I need you to be careful. If they silence one woman who knew too much, they might try again. His words made the room feel colder. Lily pressed closer to me, and I wrapped my arms around her protectively. When we were finally allowed to leave, dawn was breaking. The sky was a dull gray, and the scent of rain lingered in the air. Michael drove in silence, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. We pulled up to my house, and Lily, exhausted, fell asleep in the back seat. I turned to Michael. You heard what she said. Michael, if Rothwell's involved, you need to be careful. He nodded absently, eyes fixed on the road. I'll handle this, Mom. I'll find out who did this to Grace, to Sophie, to all of us. But the determination in his voice frightened me. It wasn't strength I heard. It was obsession. That night, after tucking Lily into bed, I sat alone in the living room. The events of the wedding played on a loop in my mind. The gunshot, the confession, the fall. I could still hear Sophie's final words. I glanced at the old photo on the mantel. Grace holding newborn Lily, smiling brightly. My chest ached. Then the silence was broken by a faint ding from the table beside me. My phone screen lit up with the notification. One new message received. I frowned. It was from an unknown number. The text read, "You shouldn't have opened that file." My breath caught. Another message appeared seconds later. Delete everything before it's too late. A chill crawled down my spine. I opened the message thread, but the sender's number was already gone. Deleted. I checked my call log. Nothing. My hand shook as I locked the phone. Who was watching us? Was this what Sophie meant? Just then, the front door creaked. I froze, heart hammering. Michael appeared in the doorway, pale and sweating. Mom, he said, his voice low and urgent. We have a problem. He stepped closer, his phone in his hand, the screen glowing faintly. He turned the phone toward me, showing a photo message he'd received moments ago. The picture was of Lily, asleep in her bed, taken from outside her window. Beneath it, a single message glowed in white text. She's next. I felt the blood drain from my face. The phone slipped from my hands and hit the floor with a dull thud. Outside, the wind howled through the trees, rattling the window panes. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled. The nightmare wasn't over. Grace's warning had been real, and now, whoever had orchestrated all of this was coming for the only thing we had left, my granddaughter. The silence that followed was almost unbearable. The only sound was the faint ticking of the old grandfather clock in the hallway, each second stretching longer than the last. Michael's hand trembled as he held his phone. the picture of Lily still glowing on the screen. "They were inside the house," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "They were close enough to take that photo." My chest tightened and panic clawed at my throat. I rushed upstairs to Lily's room. She was still asleep, her chest rising and falling peacefully beneath her blanket. For a brief moment, relief washed over me, but it was quickly replaced by dread. The window was slightly open. The curtains moved gently with the night breeze. Someone had been there. Michael joined me, checking the window frame. "No fingerprints," he muttered. "They're professionals." He turned toward me, eyes filled with determination and fear. "Mom, we need to get her out of here. Tonight." I nodded without hesitation. We packed a small bag for Lily, trying to move quietly, but every sound felt deafening in the heavy silence. My mind raced. Who were these people? What did they want? Was it just about Grace, or was there something bigger, something that reached far beyond our family? Sophie's words replayed in my head. "They're watching everything." As we stepped outside, the cold night air hit us like ice. The sky was dark, the moon hidden behind heavy clouds. Michael started the car and I buckled Lily in the back seat without waking her. Just as we pulled out of the driveway, a black SUV at the corner of the street flicked its headlights on. My stomach dropped. "Michael," I whispered, "someone's following us." He glanced in the rearview mirror. The SUV stayed a steady distance behind, too deliberate to be a coincidence. "Hold on," he said, pressing harder on the gas. We turned sharply onto a side street, then another. But the SUV followed every move. My hands clutched the dashboard, heart pounding. "What do they want?" I cried. Michael's jaw tightened. "They want what's left of that evidence, Grace's files, and maybe us too." The chase lasted only minutes, but felt like hours. Finally, Michael pulled into an old service road near the outskirts of town and switched off the headlights. The SUV sped past, its tires screeching as it disappeared into the distance. We sat in complete darkness, breathing hard. "We can't go back home," he said quietly. "They'll find us there. We need somewhere safe." My thoughts immediately went to the countryside cottage, Grace's old family retreat by the lake, 2 hours away, isolated and rarely visited. "The cabin," I said. "They won't think to look there." He nodded, started the engine again, and we drove into the night, the road ahead swallowed by fog. By dawn, we reached the cabin. The lake was still, reflecting the gray sky, and the woods around us were silent except for the distant cry of a raven. Inside, everything was as Grace had left it, dusty but intact, filled with traces of her presence. Lily stirred awake, rubbing her eyes. "Grandma, are we on a trip?" she murmured sleepily. I forced a smile and hugged her. "Something like that, sweetheart." I didn't have the heart to tell her we were running for our lives. Michael set up his laptop on the kitchen table and began scanning what little data he'd managed to recover from his work files. "Mom," he said after a few minutes, his tone dark. "Look at this." On his screen were a series of encrypted emails between Rothwell executives and anonymous accounts. The subject lines mentioned Project Echelon, something Grace had written about in her notes. One message, dated just days before her death, read, "Grace Walker accessed the restricted archives. If she talks, we lose everything. Contain the situation." My blood ran cold. "Contain?" I whispered. "They meant kill her." Michael nodded grimly, and Sophie was their way to do it. They used her. He rubbed his temples. She probably thought if she cooperated, they'd let her live. I sank into a chair, overwhelmed by the weight of it all. Grace's death, Sophie's madness, it all pointed to something massive, a network of corruption that had decided who lived and who didn't. Suddenly, Lily's small voice broke the silence. "Grandma, there's someone outside." My heart stopped. I rushed to the window. A tall figure in a dark coat stood by the tree line, unmoving, watching the house. "Michael," I hissed, "we've been found." He grabbed the gun Sophie had dropped. He'd taken it from the police station earlier for protection, and motioned for me to stay with Lily. The figure stepped closer, hands raised. "Wait," a voice called out. It wasn't aggressive, but cautious. "Don't shoot. I'm Detective Harris." Michael hesitated. The man stepped into the light, his badge visible. "I tracked your car. You should have gone straight to the station," Harris said, his tone urgent. "They're coming for you. Rothwell isn't just a company. It's a front for something much bigger." He entered, his eyes darting around as if expecting to be followed. "You have no idea what you're caught in." Grace was right. She found evidence linking Rothwell's board to international arms deals and government officials. When she threatened to expose them, they eliminated her. Sophie was their puppet. Michael's face turned pale. "And now they think we have what Grace found?" Harris nodded grimly. "And they're not going to stop until they're sure you're silenced too." He pulled a small device from his pocket, a signal jammer, and placed it on the table. "They can't track us for a few minutes, but we have to move soon." Before I could ask where, a loud bang echoed outside. The windows rattled. Harris turned sharply, gun drawn. "They found us," he whispered. Shadows moved between the trees. 3, maybe 4 figures, approaching fast. "Get Lily," Michael yelled. I grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the back door, my heart thundering in my chest. The gunfire started, sharp, deafening cracks tearing through the still morning air. The wooden walls splintered as bullets tore through them. "Go," yelled Harris. We ran toward the woods behind the cabin, ducking low as the gunfire followed. Branches whipped against my face, my lungs burning as I held Lily close. Michael was right behind me, Harris covering our escape. "Keep moving," he shouted. "There's an old ranger station half a mile north. We can regroup there." But before we could reach the clearing, another shot rang out. Harris stumbled, clutching his shoulder, blood blooming through his jacket. "Go," he gasped. "Don't stop." Michael grabbed his arm, dragging him forward as we broke into the open. In the distance, the ranger station came into view, a small, weathered building perched on a hill. The moment we reached it, Michael kicked the door open and we stumbled inside. Harris collapsed against the wall, breathing heavily. They won't stop. You have to finish what Grace started. The files. Get them to the press. And this." I knelt beside him, pressing a cloth to his wound. "We will," I said, voice shaking. "I swear we will." Outside, the gunfire had stopped, replaced by eerie silence. I looked at Michael, his face streaked with sweat and dirt, his eyes filled with both fear and resolve. "Mom," he said softly, "if we don't end this now, they'll never let us live." I nodded, clutching Lily close, tears burning in my eyes. Grace's voice echoed in my memory once more. "If anything happens to me, tell Michael not to trust them." This wasn't just revenge anymore. It was survival. And the truth,
the one that Grace had died for, was the only weapon we had left.
The wedding night turned into a memory no one in the family could ever forget, not because of the vows, the music, or the dance, but because of what had been uncovered beneath the surface of it all. The air in the grand ballroom, once filled with laughter and candlelight, had become suffocatingly heavy with secrets. Amelia sat quietly beside Lily, her trembling hand brushing the girl's hair, both exhausted and haunted by what they had seen. The authorities were called, the whispers of guests echoing through the marble corridors like the murmurs of a broken ghost. Ava's arrest had left the hall in chaos, her perfect image shattered as officers escorted her away, her screams echoing like a wounded predator. The papers she had hidden, those confessions, bank records, and Maria's disappearance had turned into undeniable proof that Ava had orchestrated Maria's death to take her place beside Daniel. But the most horrifying part came later, when Amelia realized that Ava hadn't acted alone. When detectives began piecing together the puzzle, they discovered the second signature on several documents. Someone had helped Ava drain Maria's accounts, transfer assets, and cover the trail. That signature belonged to Daniel. The man Amelia had once loved with all a mother's heart, the man whose happiness she thought she was witnessing that very night, had been part of it all. Her son's involvement in his wife's death hit her like a physical blow. She remembered how Daniel had always defended Ava, how he had moved on too quickly, and how his eyes used to turn cold whenever someone mentioned Maria. All those little signs now made sense, forming a grotesque picture she didn't want to see. The heartbreak was unbearable. To lose a daughter-in-law she'd loved, to find her son guilty of her death, and to know that her innocent granddaughter had seen more darkness in one night than any child ever should. As the sun began to rise, Amelia stood by the window of her home, looking out over the garden Maria once tended. Lily sat nearby, wrapped in a blanket, her eyes distant but calmer now. The police had taken Daniel away hours ago, and the media outside had already begun spinning their story of betrayal and murder. Amelia could hear the faint hum of cameras flashing, but she didn't care. Her heart felt like shattered glass, each breath cutting deeper than the last. She reached for Lily's hand, feeling the small warmth that kept her anchored to reality. "You were so brave, my love. You saved lives tonight." Lily leaned against her, whispering, "Grandma, Mama would have wanted you to know." Those words were like light breaking through the fog. Maria's spirit, still present, still watching, had somehow reached her daughter. Amelia smiled through tears, realizing that though evil had tried to win, it was love that had uncovered the truth. Days later, Amelia returned to the empty ballroom. The flowers had wilted, the music was gone, and the echoes of the night seemed to linger like restless ghosts. She walked to the same table where she and Lily had sat. The tablecloth was gone, but she could still see the faint outline where the folded note had once been. Kneeling down, she whispered a prayer for Maria, asking for forgiveness, for not seeing the truth earlier, for trusting too much, for not protecting her son from himself. She left a single white rose under the table, a symbol of purity and truth, the very things that had survived that night. The staff watched quietly from a distance as she stood, her posture frail yet dignified, her expression one of both grief and strength. Amelia knew that this chapter of their lives had closed in the most tragic way possible, but she also knew that it had saved her granddaughter's future. Months passed. Lily began therapy, learning to smile again, to play, to laugh. Amelia sold the old family house and moved to a quieter town, far away from the media storm that had consumed them. She opened a small flower shop, Maria's Garden, where every bloom carried the sense of healing. Every morning, she placed a daisy near the counter, a silent reminder of her daughter-in-law's kindness and her granddaughter's courage. But every so often, she'd notice Lily pausing by the window, looking out with that same thoughtful expression. Once, when Amelia asked her what she was thinking, Lily simply replied, "Mama visits me in my dreams sometimes. She says thank you." Amelia smiled softly, realizing that love, even after death, could still protect, still guide, still bring light to the darkest corners. The story of that night spread across the internet like wildfire. The wedding of lies, they called it. People were drawn to it, not just for the crime, but for the haunting beauty of its truth, that evil can hide behind the prettiest smiles and innocence can expose it with a whisper. Amelia never gave interviews, never spoke to reporters, but one day, years later, she sat down to write it all. Not for fame, but for Lily. In her handwritten memoir, she began with a single line. My granddaughter told me to look under the table at her father's wedding. And in that moment, I saw everything I had been blind to for years. It was a confession, a lesson, and a legacy all in one. She ended it with a message of hope, that truth, no matter how painful, is the only path to peace. In the final pages, Amelia described one last dream. Maria standing in a garden full of white roses, smiling, her arms open. You did well, Mother. You protected her. You ended it. And when Amelia woke, tears ran down her cheeks, but she felt lighter, freer, as if the burden had finally been lifted. She looked over at Lily sleeping peacefully, and for the first time in years, Amelia felt something close to joy. The horror was behind them now, replaced by the quiet strength that only survivors carry. And though the memory of that night would never fade completely, it had transformed from a wound into wisdom, from pain into purpose. The story ended not with revenge or punishment, but with love, the kind that survives even after everything else has burned away.